Hello and welcome to the quarterly speaker meeting of Rockland Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mike. I'm an alcoholic and I'll be your secretary for tonight. Please silence your cell phone and be advised that this meeting is being recorded to add to our soon-to-be created Rockland Fellowship archive. We will open with a moment of silence to do with as you wish, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Tonight I've asked Guy to read how it works from Chapter 5 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hello, I'm Guy. I'm an alcoholic. This is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power, and that one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point, and we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What in order? I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter of the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we are alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Thank you. And I have asked John to read the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous.
My name's John. I'm an alcoholic. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Number 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thank you. And I've asked Rosie to read a short selection from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hello, I'm Rosie. I'm an alcoholic. This is out of More About Alcoholism on page 37. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we begin to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be.
This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially the newcomer. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask all who participate to confine their discussions to their problems with alcohol. And now we'll have our sobriety countdown with Cindy and Kelly volunteering to do that for us tonight.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly. I'm an alcoholic. Is there anyone here with 50 years of sobriety or more? Please stand up. Okay, 40 to 49. $30 to $39. 25 to 29. 20 to 24. 19 years. 18 years. 17 years. 16 years. 15. 14. 13. 12. 11. 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. Oh. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Okay, everyone with 29 days or less, please stand up and remain. 9 months. Oh, 9 months? My bad. My bad. 9 months. 6 months? 90 days? 60 days? 30 days? Okay, everyone with 29 days or less, please stand up and remain standing until your number of days is called, then you may be seated. So, stand up. Everybody with 29 or less. Okay?
So I say 28.
Yeah.
28 days.
27,
26,
25,
24,
23,
22,
21,
20,
19,
18,
17,
16,
15,
14,
13,
12,
11,
10,
9,
8,
7,
6,
5,
4,
3, 2.
1.
We got there. Wait. Nope. So remain standing. Remain standing. So both of you got 1?
2 days? 2.
1? Okay.
Oh, wow.
2 days? Okay. You go ahead and be seated. Can you come up here, please? Welcome, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to pass the baskets to observe our seventh tradition, which states that we are self-supporting through our own contributions. One of the baskets has a QR code, so you can contribute via Venmo. And we're now going to have our 10-minute speaker, Brett from Rockland.
Hi, I'm Brett, alcoholic. When Mike asked me to do this, he says, you got 10 minutes. And I was thinking, when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had this whole thing that I would say, it was Brett, alcoholic, pass. And that's basically how I was going to keep it short. Things have changed since then. I don't have that much time, so I'm just going to tell you, I grew up in like a train wreck of a household. Okay, I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and that's not why I'm an alcoholic. The reason I'm an alcoholic, I later learned, is what exactly happened to me when I was 13 years old. I went camping in one of the back pastures. That's what you do when you grow up on a farm. And with 2 cousins, and we drank alcohol that night. And it was like the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life. At 13 years old, that was the first time in those 13 years that I felt like everything was going to be okay. Alcohol was my solution. I loved the effect produced by alcohol to my core. And I could tell you that I did a lot of fancy drinking, but I didn't. That's not my story. My story is I always loved to consume as much as possible, as often as possible, until I couldn't consume anymore. And that was it. And the way it worked for me, and I'm just going to jump ahead real quick and take you to the last year and a half of my drinking. Because up until that point, there was time when I could manage it, sorta, and I wouldn't get in too much trouble. But then there were times where, how do I explain this? I got to the point where I was consuming about 1.5 liters plus or minus of the finest generic vodka money could buy. And that was my drink of choice, okay? And what I knew, I was having issues with alcohol, and at the time, and I'm still married to the same lady, and I have a 3-year-old son at the time, and I didn't want to ruin his life. I didn't want him to grow up the way I did. So I would try to stop drinking, and I'd have a seizure, and I'd end up in the emergency room, and I would spend about 2 weeks drying out, and then I would do it all over again, because somehow I could not believe that I was so weak and incapable of controlling my drinking. And the end of it looked like this. I would wake up in the morning, and it was you, people of Alcoholics Anonymous, who gave me the words to put to how I felt. You called it pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And what that meant to me was, when I would wake up or come to in the morning, at the end, I knew I was going to continue to drink. The game was over. I had crossed that line. The fight was over. I wasn't like trying to, how many swallows can I have of vodka before 7 a.m., how many by 11, how many by 12, which is what I was doing before. And then I ended up to the point where I'm just going to drink. And I don't know what happened, except for that I had what we sometimes call a moment of clarity. And I was about the middle of June 1988. I had this moment of clarity, and I knew I had to go into a medical detox, because you can only have so many seizures, and I was probably on my 4th one or something like that by then. So I went into a medical detox, and they rolled me over into a 21-day treatment program. And I did that, and I got out, and they sent me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I got here, I'd like to tell you I was like Mr. AA, but I wasn't. You know, I had brought the same behaviors and attitudes I had out there to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a liar. You know, my first sponsor was a figment of my imagination. I made him up, gave him a name. Well, because you guys were always like, you got a sponsor, get a sponsor, you got a sponsor. So I got one. His name was Roger. And needless to say, it wasn't very effective, okay? But I would hang around these rooms, and you guys would keep making me, and I say make, and that's how it felt. I'd go to a meeting in the morning, then I'd try not to drink till noon. I'd go to a noon meeting, then I'd try not to drink, and I'd go to an evening meeting. You might ask, where was my wife? Well, she was at home, and she was happy I was going to a meeting, okay? And I did that, and then I started cleaning ashtrays and doing other things like we did a few years, you know, back when we were smoking. And gradually I began to identify with the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had 2 things, I believe, going for me when I first came here. One was that I knew I couldn't drink. I didn't really understand what alcoholism was, but I couldn't drink. And the second one was I could listen. I couldn't talk in meetings, but I could listen. And so I listened to speaker tapes all the time. That's what I did. And I eventually got this sponsor named Ray. And I was struggling. I couldn't make that decision to get honest, right? It was like, and this was what he told me when I asked him to be my sponsor. He said, this program demands rigorous honesty. And if you can't do that, don't waste my time and don't waste yours. You might as well just go back out. And I actually thought that was a little harsh. But I understood what he was saying, because this man walked the walk. Walk the talk. He lived Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was struggling. I'm getting up and I'm listening to these speaker tapes, you know, and I'd hear you guys say, to drink is to die. To drink is to die. But that wasn't my story. I would try to drink every day. And when I got to the evening, I would consume so much that I was hoping I would die and not wake up. That was the end of my drinking. So I come here, and you guys are saying that. And I was listening to this one speaker tape one time, and the speaker said, It's never been the fear of dying that's kept me in this program all these years. It's the fear of living the way I lived all those years. I just couldn't do it anymore. Whether it was Venus and Mars lined up or something, but that moment, it came clear to me that I was going to have to give this 100%. And I made that decision to go, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. And it may not work, I don't know, but I'm going to try. And I got involved in service. And for me, everybody's journey, I believe, is a little bit different here. But I did my 4th and 5th step, and I got as honest as I could. And I did it in my 5th step in McKinley Park, downtown Sacramento. And that day, when I walked out of the park, no burning bushes, but I felt different. Just felt different. The world wasn't such a dark place anymore. And I felt like I had hope. And for those of you who are new, that's all I want to encourage you to do is give this 100%. Give it a shot. Because what do you got to lose? Go back to where you were. And so I did that. Immediately my sponsor would say, Brett, get into try every aspect of service work that's out there. So I did. He said, you'll find what works for you, where you're comfortable and where you think you make the best contribution to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did. And that just changed my life. General service changed my life. It was an experience to go with people who actually cared. You guys amaze me that you actually care. That was not my experience prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I've only got 2 minutes left. And what I wanted to say was I wanted to try to share a little bit of how I feel my spiritual experience, I can put it into words. Prior to coming here at 31 years old, the world was a dark place. And all I was trying to do was to change the world so that I could fit into it. And by working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, bringing you people in my life, what happened was the world lightened up. And the world wasn't such a bad place. And that comes from me changing inside. And I get that. The only way I can relate to that out of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, is Appendix 2, first paragraph. Try not to talk too much like that, but I can get that way, is last few sentences, personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. That's what I felt. I had changed. I became a different person. And that's a wonderful life that I've had here. It's never been 100% easy, I promise you that. I've lost my brother and my sister to this disease, mother, father. I mean, it just goes on and on. But one thing I have is I have hope that every morning when I wake up and I do my meditation and I try to be the best that I can. I was sharing with a new friend before the meeting. We had this person that we had listened to in the past named Norm Alfie. And I would listen to these tapes from Norm, and Norm would say, we sort of got to keep it simple. 1, don't drink. Be yourself, and just try to do a little bit better today. And that's how I try to live my life today. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's my pleasure to introduce our 45-minute speaker, June from Venice.
Hi, my name's June. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you very much for letting me be a part of your evening tonight. Thank you, Michael, for calling and inviting me. And Brett, you did a fabulous job. I think 10 minutes is a lot harder than anything else, really. I want to welcome those of you who identified as new and anybody else who might be new or visiting Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I'm asked to share for this long, I always try to remember to say exactly the same thing in the very beginning, because it's the most important thing that I can say while I'm up here tonight. And I always mention that when I was new, and sadly, sometimes even today, I can't listen to everything that they're saying in the meetings. They're frequently going on, and I need to think about myself. So, and that certainly was true when I was new. And so what I'd like to ask is if you are new or visiting in particular, if you'd hang in with me for a couple of minutes here. I'm going to say the most important things while I'm the whole night, while ever I'm up here. One would be that I'm not an expert on alcoholism, on Alcoholics Anonymous, on any page in the big book, on anything about this program whatsoever. I'm just a member, and I'm going to stand up here and share a little bit about my experience, strength, and hope. The other thing that's very, very important to me is that Alcoholics Anonymous is absolutely free. A lot of people come to Alcoholics Anonymous a lot of different ways. People have always come by court cards, they've come by family members, they've come by doctors, maybe a rabbi, a minister, whatever it might be, a friend. But more and more over the years, it seems people are coming through different programs. They're hospitals, or they might be a sober living, or whatever it might be. And I don't really think it matters how anybody ever gets to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I know that sometimes it's a little bit murky which part is the program and which part is AA. Like I heard this guy share a while ago at my old home group, the Ohio Street meeting in Los Angeles, and he said, when he was new, he was in a treatment facility, and it was a Sunday. And some of the people in the facility said, all right, anybody who wants to go to the AA, to the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting tonight, let's line up in the back. We're going to fill up the vans. And he went to the payphone, and he called his insurance company to see if that was included in what, his plan was. And of course, it was a Sunday night, and so nobody answered. And so he didn't go to the meeting. And I want you to know that it's free. I want you to know that for a lot of reasons. One, because I think it's one of the most remarkable things about Alcoholics Anonymous. But on a personal level, it's because if Alcoholics Anonymous had not been free, I could not have come. If Alcoholics Anonymous had not stayed free, I could not have stayed. I was over 10 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous before I could ever afford to put $1 in the basket when we passed that seventh tradition, because we're self-supporting and we don't take money from anybody who's not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, even family members who are so happy that we're sober and want to donate. We don't accept that money. We're self-supporting. But in those first 10 years that I was sober, I wasn't able to put $1 in the basket, hardly ever, because I didn't have $1, And it's funny, I like to mention, a number of years ago, a woman came up to me and she said, I heard you when I was new. And that's always kind of this great feeling. You think, wow, something I said, somebody was new and they remember it. I don't remember a lot of things that people said when they were new. She goes, yeah. She goes, I remember you said you were over 10 years sober before you could afford to put $1 in the basket. And she said, and I thought, what a loser. So, you never know. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. It's given me a life I never would have wanted, and it's made me a person I wouldn't have even liked when I got here. So it's been this fascinating journey. I'll go ahead and I'm going to try and share a few different things as it suggests, that we do. If you are new, I want to encourage you to go to lots of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I believe one of the greatest strengths that we have is that we're people who normally would not mix. And so I think that if you go to 30 meetings or 90 meetings, whatever it is that you and perhaps your sponsor have talked about, then you'll be able to see. Because even though, turns out, Brent and I have a lot of similarity in our stories, in how we grew up and where we came from, that's not the story of every member of Alcoholics Anonymous. We drank different. We acted different. Some of us were party animals. Some of us were not. I was not a party animal. It's funny, even today, I consider myself socially awkward. I heard a woman in a meeting and she said, I'm a gregarious loner. And I thought, that's perfect for me, But anyway, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I grew up with a lot of violence. I grew up with a lot of other kinds of abuse that were happening in my home on a regular basis. And a lot of broken promises that kind of go along with a lot of alcoholism. Maybe not everybody's, but it was going on in mine. And I'll tell you that by the time I was 5 years old, I was done. I did not want to be here anymore. I wasn't looking forward to anything anymore. I could look around and I could tell it was going to be like this and continue to always be like this, and it was going to get worse. And I needed a way out. And I always, try to remember to mention that originally they were going to call the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous The Way Out. But they found out there were too many books already called that, so they settled on Alcoholics Anonymous. And I always also try to remember to tell you, because I can get scattered, it's like I'm like one of those people in a Disney movie where the dog goes, squirrel, and so I'll go off on some rampage and I'll never get back to what I was saying before. But before I do that, I'm going to try to remember to say to you that I have had a psychic change here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had the slow, extra slow educational variety. But as a result of the principles and the things that I have learned from Alcoholics Anonymous because of grace and fellowship, I have had that psychic transformation, but it was very, very slow. And I never believed Alcoholics Anonymous could work for somebody like me. And I didn't believe it for years, even while I was in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And a lot of the things that I did at my sponsor or at my group's request, I did to show that it wasn't going to work in my case. But what's interesting is that it doesn't really matter why, for me, my experience has been it doesn't really matter why I do the right things that I do. It just matters that I do them. I heard a guy on Zoom a few years ago, and he said, this is a copycat program. Just make sure you're copying the right cat, And I've been very, very fortunate. I was able to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous when many members of the first generation to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous were still alive, and I got to know a lot of them. I come from my mom. I mentioned I rose in an alcoholic family. My mom, she was a single parent. I'm an only child. But my father, I was able to find out. My father was from Ireland, and his father, my grandfather, died at 46 years old in Ireland in a car accident. He was the drunk driver, my grandfather. He was killed. People in his car were killed, and some people in the other car were killed. That left my grandmother with 13 of her children to raise, one of whom was my father. My father was to drink himself to death alone in a hotel room before he was 50. And then, my mom, as I mentioned, was an alcoholic. And so, the idea, when my mom was born, Alcoholics Anonymous did not exist. When my grandfather was born or died, Alcoholics Anonymous still did not exist. When my father was born, Alcoholics Anonymous did not exist. And so it's really important to me to remember that I'm very fortunate to have been born in a time where we have a solution. When our founders, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, first met, and we consider the date of Alcoholics Anonymous beginning when the second member got sober. We don't count our anniversary from the day that Bill Wilson got sober. We count it from when there were two, one alcoholic talking to another, and that was Dr. Bob. But when Bill Wilson met Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson had 6 months sober. And there is not an alcoholic in this room or any other room that doesn't know how long 6 months is to stay sober when you're getting sober. It's a really, really long time. And at the time, as people were getting sober, Bill Wilson had 6 months, 7 months. I mean, they were like fascinated. And Bill had a nervous stomach. And so because of that, he had these ulcers and stuff. So he drank tomato juice and sauerkraut because it helped his stomach kind of settle with all that acid. And so back in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, they didn't know why Bill was staying sober. You know what I mean? They didn't have meetings. They didn't have a directory. They didn't have a big book. They didn't have sponsors. They thought maybe drinking tomato juice and sauerkraut. And so that's what they gave the new people. So aren't you grateful we have a book, So anyway, I grew up in Venice, California, and my mom was a bar drinker. And when I mentioned that I grew up with a lot of violence, I mean, there was, before I got sober, I've seen men shot, I've seen them stabbed, I've seen them arrested, I've seen them killed. I saw a lot of things happen, and I saw some of those things happen to women also. Before I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, though, I don't ever remember seeing a man cry. That doesn't mean it's true. I'm just telling you, I don't ever remember seeing it. And I thought that was because men do not feel pain. And I'll tell you, I always felt so much pain. I mean, it horrified me how much pain I felt. You know, I went to 18 grammar schools, 7 junior highs, 5 high schools. I always had this curly hair. I was tall, I was skinny, and I got teased a lot. And these were strangers. I didn't know them. I didn't care about them. And they shouldn't have mattered one way or another. But when these kids would tease me, it was kind of like I was being cut with a knife inside. And sometimes I'd even cry. And for me, this is where I believe that the self-hatred, which is all I ever remember having about myself, really ran from. Because the idea of crying in front of people, especially people I didn't even care about, was the most humiliating thing I could possibly imagine. And I hated myself for that. Hated myself that I could not control my emotions. And the women that I knew in my life, I saw a lot of them were pretty good at controlling their emotions, but when some of those things happened, when their kids overdosed or when someone died or whatever, they fell apart and cried, a lot of them. And so I looked at those two different groups, and I decided immediately which group I wanted to be like. And I spent my whole life before coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and a number of years after I got sober trying to be what I thought a man was. And to me, a man was someone who cared about no one, who felt absolutely nothing with the exception of anger and rage. And that's how I wanted to live my life. That was one of my baby elephant beliefs that took a long time in Alcoholics Anonymous for me to even consider that it could be wrong. And so alcohol allowed me to not care. Allowed me to not care about you. Allowed me, thankfully, to not care about me. And if you live a life like that, and you drink the way I did, and you go the places that I went, then you're going to know, like Brett was talking about, what pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is. Because I didn't care, you know. I started to drink on a regular basis when I was 8 years old. I'd already been adding other chemicals into my body before that, and really just hoping that I could just not wake up. I found in my life, because of that emotional sensitivity, that without alcohol, I couldn't control my emotions, but with alcohol, I could. You know, I would much rather you punch me in my face than hurt my feelings, and that's the way I lived my life, and I got beat up a lot. Eventually, you know, I wanted to be tough, and so I joined a gang in Venice, and it was a small gang, and, you know, and I did a lot of fighting. Because, I mean, what's the point of joining a gang if you're not going to do a lot of fighting? I did a lot of fighting, but I like to always remember to mention I've never won a fight. But I never fought less than 5 people at a time. And so I walked around with a black eye or a swollen lip or my face, you know, bruised or, you know, whatever it was. Because those were my values, and that's the way I was trying to live. And I'm very grateful for alcohol. I'm as grateful for what alcohol did for me as I am for what Alcoholics Anonymous has been able to do for me. Because if alcohol hadn't worked to shut it off the way that it did, I would have had to have been locked up in some kind of an institution, because I couldn't handle it out there. It hurt way too much. And alcohol gave me a break from that. You know, I guess it's sort of like that first line in the third step prayer, you know, relieve me of the bondage of self. Alcohol did that for me until it didn't. And so, you know, I'm one of those people that, you know, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. By the time I got here, I didn't know if I wanted what you had. I didn't know what you had. I just know I sure didn't want what I had anymore. And I was on the jumping off place that it talks about in the big book, because alcohol, I was getting as drunk as I'd ever gotten, like laying on the floor. I can't get up drunk, which is the only kind of drunk I ever was. Never had a social drink in my life. I never wanted one. But even though I was that drunk, it wasn't shutting off the feelings anymore. And so I walked in Alcoholics Anonymous, and alcohol wasn't working the way that it had been. And I didn't believe that Alcoholics Anonymous or anything else could work for someone like me. And that's a jumping off place, because I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, and when I got here, you know, when the old timers, I'm so grateful for the people that were here. You know, when I got here, like if they had said to me, June, if you keep living the way you're living, doing what you're doing, 6 months from now, drinking the way you're drinking, you're going to be dead. I would have run out and kept drinking if they'd promised me that. What they told me was that if you're an alcoholic of the type that we talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, particularly in the doctor's opinion, then it's going to get worse, never better. And My mom, that I mentioned, being an alcoholic, my mom was in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous for over 40 years with various periods of sobriety. And I saw firsthand that this is a progressive disease. It's not just something that old timers kind of make up. And if you stick around in Alcoholics Anonymous and you watch some of the people that you care about, unfortunately go back to drinking, and if they're lucky enough to get back, you will sometimes be absolutely amazed at how bad it got so quickly. It just really wouldn't have made sense to me, I don't think, if I hadn't seen what happened with my mom and a lot of my mom's friends, because my mom hung out with the Slippers, because she was a slipper. And I'm very, very grateful for the Slippers for lots and lots of reasons. One of the most important people that I met when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous was one of my mom's drinking buddies who drank in those really violent bars that she drank in. And, he was at the meeting, that first meeting I went to, and he had achieved pretty much everything I wanted out of life. He had just gotten out of jail. He had a knife on his belt. He was really hostile, and everybody was afraid of him. And I just couldn't believe that anybody who had achieved all of that would need to go to AA. I mean, what else is there? And I talked to him that night at the meeting, and then I got drunk the next night, and then I came back to some meetings, and I talked to Paul, and I explained to him that I wasn't an alcoholic, how we like to do that, and I was too young to be an alcoholic, and I wasn't anything like my mother, who was an alcoholic, and, I was very, very non-alcoholic, and of course later you find out non-alcoholics don't spend any time trying to convince people they're not alcoholic. They already know. And Paul turned to me, he goes, June, I'm new in AA, and I'll tell you, he said, they tell me I can't diagnose anybody's disease but my own. He said, but in your case, I'm going to make an exception. He said, I've seen the way that you drink, and I've seen the way that you're living. And he said, I happen to believe if you don't come into this program, take what these people have to offer you, that within 6 months or less, you're going to be out on the streets, you're going to be selling your ass, and you're going to be shooting stuff, and that's going to be the end of the way that you're going to live, for another 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and you hate yourself so much already right now, you've already come to Alcoholics Anonymous. So, those are your choices. And I thought a little bit about what he said. I knew he wasn't trying to make up a story like the teacher in high school might do. I knew he was telling me things that had happened or were beginning to happen in my life, but I did not want to be an alcoholic. And I did not want to join an organization that was allowing my mother to belong to it. So I had a lot of these, these different things. And yet in that 2-week period of time, I kept drinking. I came back to some meetings. I didn't raise my hand because I wasn't an alcoholic. But in that 2-week period of time, absolutely every option but Alcoholics Anonymous was removed. My mother and I had a violent relationship. We'd had it for a while. Between the two of us drinking and the way that we were and the way that we grew up and the lifestyle that we had, it got violent, and on both of our parts. And at one of the times when I attacked my mom, she said, I don't have to be subjected to that kind of attack. You're going to leave. And I left, and I never went back. And when I left there, the rest of my family didn't actually invite me back in for any activities until I was about 5 years sober. I had been in a number of foster homes. None of them wanted me back. I thought, well, at least I'll try some of these recovery homes. There were 3 back then in LA that I knew of. None of them would take me, some because of my age and some just because of my attitude. And I thought, well, you know what? Who cares? Who cares about families? Who cares about programs? Who cares about any of that? None of that really matters. If you're a tough broad like I wanted to be from Venice Beach, the only thing that's important is my gang. And then one day as I walked down an alley, all 5 members of my own gang beat me up. And so I found myself sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 87 pounds. I had a black eye. I had a swollen lip. I had no money. I had no place to live. I only had a 7th grade education. I didn't have a job. I didn't wear shoes because I'm from Venice Beach, and tough broads have to have tough feet, and I raised my hand in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I know today that there were some people there that did not know about the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I certainly didn't know about them. And I raised my hand in that meeting, and a few of those people knew how old I was because my mother had been in and out of that group for, I don't know, maybe 7 years at that time. And they knew who I was and how old I was. And after the meeting, they came over and they told me they didn't want little kids sitting in their meetings while they talked about serious things. And if I came back, that they'd get together and throw me out. And I didn't know Alcoholics Anonymous had a 3rd tradition, and they didn't know it either. that says the only requirement for AA membership is the desire to stop drinking. And I didn't know it then, and I left that meeting, and I just thought AA didn't want me either, and I didn't want me either. And I hadn't for as long as I could remember, so I went over to a friend of my mother's house. I went into her bathroom, which is the place I went at anybody's house I ever visited. I found enough of the pills I needed to kill myself, and I took enough of them to do it. And before I passed out, I went to a noon meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and by the time I got there, I could not stand, I couldn't sit, I had to lay in the meeting. And they realized that they needed to get me to a hospital, and that's where I came to. Doctor gave me something to make me throw up and explained to me that what I had taken was to slow down my heart, and had I been there 5 or 10 minutes later, that I would have been in a coma that they probably could not have brought me out of. And I don't know why that overdose was any different than all the other overdoses I inflicted upon myself. I just know that it was different, because since that time, I haven't taken anything that affects me from the neck up. And that's how I personally define sobriety. I've done that one day at a time since the 13th of July, 1972, which means that I've been continuously sober for over 51 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you are new, especially, I want to assure you that I didn't want to live for another 51 years. I didn't plan on staying sober that long, you know. I was looking for a quick 6-month way to death. And I'm amazed. It talks about in our book, you will be amazed before you are halfway through. I've been amazed for a very long time. You know, when I love that we give out these different commitments. And like Brett was saying, service has been super important to me, and I've had a lot of different service commitments. But when I got sober in those first 10 years, when I couldn't put $1 in the basket, I hated that I couldn't put any money in the basket. And so I think in my mind, I don't know, I can't, you know, never had a psychology class or anything, so I don't know if that's true. But I think in my mind, with my pride, I hated the fact that I couldn't put $1 in the basket. So I always did like $1's worth of work at any meeting I ever went to, setting up chairs or cleaning up something or doing something. And one of the meetings I went to was about this size group on Tuesday night, and they made me the greeter. And, you know, it's wonderful in AA. We don't really always interview for the best candidate. We just sort of. And so I had just been beaten up by my gang, as I mentioned. So I had a black eye, I had a swollen lip. I wasn't wearing shoes. It wasn't like I took them off to go to the meeting. I just didn't wear them. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I started wearing a chain on my wrist and one on my ankle. I had a jacket, black jacket, and on the back it said, "Do unto others and then split," which was my own spiritual philosophy. Like Brett mentioned, we smoked. Most people smoked. I smoked. I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I don't know if I really smoked all of them, but I always had a cigarette in my hand. It was kind of more like a weapon, you know, to make sure nobody got too close. And after I'd been sober a little while, I took up smoking cigars and then later a pipe. I had a very limited vocabulary when I got sober. Consisted almost solely of profanity. There were a few exceptions, the, and, mother. And I found a lot of people didn't like that kind of language if I used it. And if they got too close to me, I'd use it. And so I would stand there at the door greeting the new people as they came in. Sometimes as they'd walk by, their sponsor or whoever was with them would say, "If you keep drinking, you can end up like that." You know. And those people who didn't know how old I was, they were guessing my age at that meeting. They were guessing my age at 37. If I'd shown you my birth certificate, it would have told you I was 13. And if you'd asked me, I would have told you I was 1,000. I think it's pretty fascinating that here I am tonight, 51 years later, and I feel younger than I did when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a hell of a deal. You know, and I'm not saying I don't have those days where I feel old or I have a wrinkle or, you know, all of that. I mean, it's not like I, you know, fly around with little angel wings all the time. But I came in here with just that heavy, old, broken, damaged, sad, you know, kind of way. And I didn't think there was anything in this book, these steps, these meetings. I mean, come on. How can you change that? I still don't completely understand, you know. And I remember sitting in that meeting, that particular meeting, and one night, and I was less than 30 days sober. the reason I know that is because there was a woman up here speaking, and I didn't really listen to women speakers. I only tried to listen to men, and I tried not to listen to too much of them either. So, like I said, I had a lot of thoughts, very busy, and I had a lot of problems, real problems. Not like some of these other people. They'd say, "Oh, there's problems." No, I had real. My problems were real, and I needed special answers. I felt so. Anyway, I remember this woman, and she was up there talking at the podium, and her name was Sybil, and she had either 31 or 32 years that night, and she was the first woman to get sober west of the Mississippi. She got sober in 1941, right after the Jack Alexander article. And when Sybil died in 1988, I'm not very good at math thing here, but I think I have 98, because when she died, she had 57 years sober. And at the time that Sybil died, she was the longest living sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous in the whole world. And I got to know her. But anyway, I didn't know her very well that night. I was sitting in the meeting, and she was up there talking and going on and on, like you're sitting there thinking I am. And she was going on, and then she just said, newcomers, I have an amazing life, she said. She said, I've married a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have so much fun, and I can't even believe the things that have happened for me. And, I have a new freedom. She said, I have a new happiness, all these great things. And, I wasn't particularly happy for her, but I was kind of halfway listening. And then she said, and newcomers, and so then I started to listen because I thought, well, this will be about me. She said, newcomers, she said, if I had a magic wand and I could wave it and I could give you an amazing life, she said, I wouldn't do it. I thought, whoa. I know there aren't any magic wands, but isn't a good AA speaker supposed to say, oh, newcomers, I wish I had a magic wand and I could give you an amazing life too. She didn't even want to. I just thought that was mean, And she goes, I wouldn't do it. She said, because I wouldn't want to rob you of your journey. Now, as I sat there that night with less than 30 days, I had no money. I had no place to live. I had no family. I didn't have a car. I had a 7th grade education. I was illegally in the country. I was facing court cases. And I just want you to understand, I did not want a journey. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I just, let's fix all this stuff up here. But of course, here I am tonight, many, many years later. And I'm so grateful that she didn't rob me of my journey. But then, of course, you start realizing nobody can rob you of your journey because it's your journey. And the thing I've learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous is along the way in your journey, if you are interested or willing, there will always be somebody who will be happy to share with you as they walk along, ahead, with, and behind. And we need all of them, Let's see. Where am I going to go here for a minute? I don't, it's hard when you talk for, say, 40 minutes, because I don't like to make it sound like I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and things were really, really hard, and they were. And then I stayed sober, and now everything's fabulous all the time because I have the 12 steps and, I have a sense of humor, which I didn't have when I got here, and that is on my gratitude list. Let me just tell you that. But, of course, life is going to continue to happen. And I was very unhappy about life continuing to happen. I remember the first time I got a cold when I was sober. I thought, are you kidding me? I am not drinking. How much is the universe going to ask of me? And then, like when you go to work and they want you there on time. It's like, I'm an alcoholic. They don't care. They want you there on time. They want you to do your job. There's this friend of mine, and she shares this story about there was a woman who got a job, and everybody in the office was in AA, and they'd hired her, and she never was, within a week, this was me too, by the way, but, anyway, within a week, she always was late at least one of the days of the 5. Or she left early at least one of the days of the 5. She always took a longer lunch or, something every single week. And one week, she came in on time for 5 days. She did her lunch hour the way that the lunch hour was. She left work when work was over. And on Friday, the whole company stood up and gave her a standing ovation. And that's kind of how I feel like, if I do all that, and I don't drink, shouldn't I get a standing ovation? But apparently the world doesn't always think that. So anyway, it's been really important for me to have a sponsor. It's been really important for me to stay active in service, really important for me to have a sense of humor and to have a sponsor with a sense of humor. I remember once I was telling my sponsor, I said, Bob, my sponsor has 56 years. He wasn't always my sponsor, but I've known him since I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, because when I first came in, I wouldn't accept rides when people would offer me a ride because I didn't want anybody to think I needed any help. So I didn't take rides. And I'd either walk or hitchhike or take the bus. And there's this weird thing that I still haven't figured out either, but like after meetings, we would go to coffee. And then after coffee, people, would most often, somebody would offer me a ride. I didn't take rides. So I don't want anybody thinking I need help. So I'd go outside from the coffee shop and I'd hitchhike. And then sometimes someone from the meeting would pick me up. And I'd get in the car because that just seemed different. It's like, this is, I don't know why. And my sponsor, who was not my sponsor at the time, he had he had 5 years when I was new. And he would see me at a meeting and he would pick me up because he had 2 little daughters at home. And he was really worried about some young girl getting into a car with strangers at 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't worried about it. I just thought, yeah, something bad will happen, whatever. Something bad always happens. I didn't care about me for a long time after I got sober. But the people of Alcoholics Anonymous, cared about me, and my sponsor was one of them. And my sponsor is so active. I'm telling you, he's like the Energizer Bunny. He sponsors more people than I sponsor. He goes to more meetings than I go to. He plays more golf. I don't play any, but he plays more golf than I do, and he's got like this really full, active, enthusiastic life. And it's not all AA, but AA is a huge part of it. And that's sort of the foundation of what I've been experiencing and what I love and what I have. I heard this woman at a meeting, and this is something that I'm a story person, and these are the kind of things that stick in my head. So this woman, she was talking at Brentwood, and so she said at the meeting, she said, I want to tell you about what happened to me last week. She said, now last week, she said, I had this big lump on my neck, and the doctor wanted to do a biopsy. So they did that biopsy. And she said, and last week I'd been writing a book. Been writing this book for quite a while. She said, I finished the book and I mailed it to a publisher. And she said, and last week, she said, when I was a kid, I was a child actress. Don't ask me who she is because I have no idea. I don't know who anybody is. But anyway, she said, I was a child actress. And all of a sudden, in the last recent years, I've decided I'd like to get back into acting. So I auditioned for a part last week. So she said, now I want to tell you what happened this week. She said, on Monday, I got a phone call from the doctor's office. And the doctor's office said, we did the test, and it's benign, you don't have cancer. She said, on Tuesday, I got a call from my publisher, and they said, we loved your book, and we want to publish it. She said, on Wednesday, I got a call, and they said, we didn't like your audition, we gave the part to someone else. And she said, and I turned to my friend, and I said, nothing ever works out for me. So this is why it's really important for me to stay close to people in Alcoholics Anonymous who can remind me. And, I talk a lot about and think a lot about Norm Alpe. When I got sober, every time I heard Norm, I always, I'd want to join AA. And then I'd remember I already joined or I wouldn't have been there hearing Norm, but he was one of the most enthusiastic. I really encourage you to listen to a tape or online or whatever there are different ways you can do it now. And one of the things that Norm would always say was he would say, but for a moment of grace, people like you, rooms like this, I could have missed it all. Thank you for not letting me. Thanks for inviting me tonight.
Let's give both our speakers another hand. Thank you to everyone who volunteered, and we had people making coffee, Brian helping with the sound, people passing the baskets, and those that read. in our sobriety countdown. We need a few people to stick around and help clean up. And Kelly, thank you. We'll now join together and say the Lord's Prayer. How you doing?